Thank you very much, Gertina. I wrote that, but it's still a little embarrassing. Embarrassing to hear it. I'm going to talk about the Oxford Symposium on School-Based Family Counseling in terms of its past, how it came to be, its present in terms of maybe the last 6 or 7 years, and then some thoughts I have about what's needed for the future. So we began in 2003, so I'm going to look at this period 2003 to 2012. So in 1974, I was doing a master's degree in counseling psychology at the University of British Columbia, and the chair of the department there was John Friesen. And John has been to our symposia here twice. And John got funded in a research project to build a counseling center in a school in Richmond School District, which is in the southern part of Vancouver. And he staffed the school with school counselors and with family counselors. And I was his research assistant, and I actually drew up the architectural plans, an early version of them, for this family counseling element that was going to be in the schools. And I thought, well, that's just brilliant, to put a family counselor into a school. So that was my early exposure to the idea of family counseling being brought into the school. Then I came to San Francisco, where I worked there for 33 years. And in the Center for Child and Family Development, with my colleague Emily Gerrard, we went into about 30 different schools in the San Francisco area, and we put family counselors into those schools. And during this period, I really wrestled with what to call this. And originally, I looked at calling it something like family, because it involves family and school, so you can put those together. So I knew whatever we called it, it's got to have the word family, it's got to have the word school. So originally I was thinking of family-based school counseling, decided against that because the phrase school counseling sounds like a particular profession. I didn't want it to do that. Then I thought about school-based family therapy, because family therapy is very generic, and almost every mental health profession does family therapy. But then I learned that principals wouldn't let us go in the school if we called it family therapy. Maybe they're more open to it now because of the school mental health movement, but back then, forget it. And so finally, I settled on school-based family counseling. Had to call it something. Then, while I was at USF, I met Sister Mary Peter Travis. She was a professor with doctorate from Stanford. Moral development was her area. And you can see here from this picture, you don't mess with her. And she became chair of the board for the Center of Child and Family Development. And she talked with us. She was always talking about Oxford because she was her favorite place to go. She was very fond of John Henry Newman, who was a cardinal in the Catholic Church and left the Anglican Church, went over to the Catholic Church. And so she just loves to talk about him. And she would have Oxford teas on the campus in the conference room for her department. She would invite you to come, and she would do an Oxford tea.
That is a cohort countryware teapot. Wow.
So I was sort of open to the idea of Oxford as being a very exciting place. And then I came to a conference here in Oxford, and I thought, wow, this is like Hogwarts. It's like amazing. And then I met this fellow. He came into my office one day, and he told me that he had a degree from Cambridge, and I was chair of the department at the time, and did I have a job that he could have? And I threw a net over him, and I thought, this is just the person to help us negotiate Oxford culture, which is different, and you have to know what the culture is in order to fit in here. So that was an important step. And then we had our first symposium here in 2003 at Keble College. So that was the beginning. And these are the 14 locations of the Oxford Symposium. You could see in the darker color, we started after 4 years to try to go somewhere different every now and then. So we've been to Hong Kong 3 times, University of Barcelona once, and this is everybody here at the University of Hong Kong. So where do our members live? They live in 18 different countries, and when we invite people, the way you get invited is we actually look at your resume, and we go into journals and we look to see if you've written an article, and if we like the article, we don't look at your resume. But we also go into the university websites, and I was explaining to somebody today how you go down through, like there's 20 faculty members, so I would look at every one of them, and it's just appalling the narrowness of research around the planet. There's very few people who are looking at schools and families together. Never ceases to amaze me. So these are the countries we currently have people from. We're wanting to expand that. And we were hoping that Yasmin would be coming from Turkey, but it's unfortunate she wasn't able to come. So hopefully next year she'll be able to do that. So we have 100 members. These are the institutions that they're associated with. I'd say about a third of the members are more active in terms of we see them from year to year, not every year, but every now and then they'll come back and connect with us. Then this fellow showed up, Dr. Hans Everts. He showed up at, I think it was the first or second symposium, and in his resume, he was listed as being the previous editor of 3 different journals. And I thought, gee, we need a journal. This is great for that. So Hans was up for it, and he's the senior editor of the International Journal for School-Based Family Counseling, and we have an associate editorial board. And Christina's going to be talking on Friday about how we can get all of you to help publish more, because it's very important we do that to broaden our field. These are the articles that were published in 2010, and I chose this slide just so you could kind of see the variety of articles that we have in people from different parts of the world publishing. So we think of the symposium as an invisible college, and I showed this slide, I think it was in the first or second year we did this. The invisible college, the term was originally used to describe in the 1600s the early emergence of scientists and how in different countries they would communicate with each other. And they didn't have the internet, of course, back then, but what they do, they take a book and they write stuff on the margin and then they send it to each other. So they pass the book around in order to share their ideas. So what's interesting to me about this idea of the invisible college is I immediately felt, after we did the first symposium, I felt closer to all of the people here than I did to my own department, because we're working in an interdisciplinary fashion, and often within our departments, our colleagues are working in a narrower fashion. So it kind of made sense that this is a sort of a global college, and we come together once a year for the conference, but I think of the symposium as being more than a conference. It's an international association. This is a picture I found of an invisible college. It was somebody drew this or painted this a long time ago, and it's very clear to me that I think what we have here is an assistant professor trying to get on board here and get tenure, and I think these are the full professors up here. This person with the snake is a dean. This person was denied tenure. Notice it's on wheels. You can move the college around. Right? So thinking of the present as the period in the last 3 years, what sort of things have been going on? Well, in 2013, we self-published this book. It has 51 chapters, and most of the authors were Oxford Symposium members, and it really is sort of the handbook of school-based family counseling. And we had the opportunity to have it published with two well-known publishers. And the problem was they didn't want 51 chapters. They just wanted the first 20 chapters, so it'd be shorter. And I just thought, well, that's wrong. You can't invite people to write a chapter and say, sorry, we can't sign you for that. So we published it ourselves. It's available on Amazon. The book is huge. It's just too big. You can, use it to press leaves. It's that weighty. And the book was organized around what I call the school-based family counseling meta model, which looks at a school focus and a family focus on that axis, and then a prevention focus or an intervention focus, which is originally I called this a remedial focus, but I thought intervention sounds a little bit more constructive. And so these are the quadrants. School prevention as the first quadrant, and these are the sorts of things that go on in that quadrant. Guidance groups, classroom meeting, stress management, psychoeducational things. In school intervention, we have the traditional school social work, school counseling, individual counseling, teacher consultation, crisis intervention, principal consultation, spanning both of those quadrants. Down in family prevention, we have parent education, parent support groups, and in family intervention, we have traditional family therapy sorts of things. So the book was organized with the chapters covering each of those quadrants. What's important is that every mental health profession can use this model. So it's meant to be an interdisciplinary model, not specific to any one of the 7 main mental health disciplines. So in terms of a case study, this is in the YouTube video that I posted recently, some of you may have seen. If we think of a boy we'll call Luis, who's age 10, and then the school-based family counselor, and these are the persons in the brief case study I'm going to give. The teacher, Miss Jones, a bully who's been bullying Luis, the principal, and then Luis's parents, and then Mark's grandfather and grandmother. These are the characters. This is how the model would be applied. And so in doing a school-based family counseling assessment, we would start with the conflict between the two boys, and then we would look at the relationship between Luis's parents, where there's a disengaged relationship between Luis and his father, and conflict between the mother and the father, who are perhaps separated. Then we'd look at the grandparents of the bully, and we would look at conflict they're having in managing Mark. His parents are out of the picture. And then we would look at the teacher's relationship with Luis, maybe under-involved with Luis, and then bystanders in the classroom, which are known to enable bullying, and then the principal, who is maybe unaware of what's going on in the school and the classroom. So applying the model, the way I think about how to do a school-based family counseling, one way to do a school-based family intervention would be to start with the boys and do some individual counseling. And then to involve the teacher in some way in a consultation, which is hard for our students because the teachers are usually older than the student and they feel nervous about working with them. And then maybe talking with the teacher about classroom management, because in teacher training it's very poorly done in the United States. There isn't a lot of it, classroom discipline, how to handle a class, you just don't get it. Then you do something with the family. You might do parent consultation, family counseling, maybe couples counseling brief. And same thing with the Smith family. And then you would want to think about the principal, because if you don't involve the principal, you can get into a lot of serious problems. And then something maybe educational with the teacher's classroom, and possibly the entire school needs an intervention. There's anti-bullying programs, and I think Sheena has been involved with those. has done presentations here on that, and then maybe something educational for the parents. So I would probably also sequence it, starting with school intervention, moving to family intervention, and then family prevention. So in this meta model, I haven't talked at all about whether you're behavioral or whether humanistic or what particular orientation you use. So it's meant to be interdisciplinary in that sense, but it's clearly a family systems model. And I know most of you are familiar with Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. It's a wonderful model. This is not meant to replace that. This is meant to sort of help you think through, okay, what techniques would I use here so that I'm constantly thinking about family, school, prevention, intervention. We have a Wikipedia definition and a description of skill-based family counseling. I did this, prepared this about 2 years ago. It was up for a week and then it was taken down because they had somebody checking for plagiarizing, and it seems that I had plagiarized myself. So I managed to straighten that out, and the site is still up. This is the opening paragraph in Wikipedia, and I want you to notice the way school-based family counseling is defined in a very general way so that no mental health profession is left, feel a sense of exclusion there. So I think that's really important that we emphasize that this is an interdisciplinary model. And so we try to invite here people from a wide variety of disciplines. And I think we have, how many of you are social workers? All sitting together, very good. So school social workers are very involved in school-based family counseling. They have been for a long time. School counselors tend to be more involved. Family counselors, less so if you look at the literature. So it's interesting as you look at all these different disciplines. So we formed some symposium teams last year for the first time. And I think it's because we were in a smaller group. There's something about the small size that seems to work better than when we have 25, 30 people. Would you agree with that, Peter?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's more like a small family. So Nurit is initiated forming a parent-teacher collaboration research team, and Nurit will be doing a presentation, I think it's on Wednesday morning, and she'll give us a report on the work of that team over the last year. And Michael is part of that team, along with Carol and Betsy, who were here last year. Our second team is the Pine Ridge Reservation consultation team. Pine Ridge Reservation is in North Dakota. It's a very poor reservation. And last year, Amanda, who is a counselor at Red Cloud School on the reservation, came with Nancy, and Nancy, they're friends. And Nancy has, for the last 20 years, had a project on the reservation called PathStar, where she has put together a team of people to bring educational and financial and social services and medical resources to the Native Americans there. And she brought Amanda to talk about a suicide epidemic that was occurring with the youth on the reservation. And I found this, there's a wonderful website for Red Cloud School, and when you look at their website, it looks just like one for any other school that you would find in the United States. It's a very slick website, and they're very proud of the fact that a lot of their students are going to Ivy League universities. However, this is a part of an article that was in the New York Times on May 1st last year. And I'm just going to give you a moment to read this. So when when Amanda was here and did her presentation with Nancy, she mentioned that there had been something like, I think it was 9 suicide attempts in May, but by the time it was August and they came here, I think it was up to 15 attempts. But what I didn't realize until I read this article was that there had been 103 attempts over a longer period. And Amanda was, when she presented, I think she was tearful. It was a very emotional topic for her. And she asked for help from us. And John did a reflecting team with us to generate ideas on how we could be helpful. And then we formed a consultation team to work with Amanda. And Carol is going to, at 3 a.m. in the morning in North Dakota, she's going to use GoToMeeting, and she's going to do a 15-minute presentation on what's been happening. So the disaster relief project, I am the team for this, and what happened was when I left California, about 2 weeks after I left, there was the San Bernardino shootings. And San Bernardino was about 45 minutes from where I lived in Palm Springs. Moved to Florida, and then the Orlando massacre, that's 2 hours from where I lived. It's like, this is not good. It's like, where can you live that's safe? And then there were the Paris attacks, and then the Brussels attacks, and then the Lahore attacks. And so by March 27th, I was feeling very upset. And I thought, what can we do? What can we do? Is there something that we can do? And then I thought, yeah, there is something we can do. School-based family counseling has something to say about this. So you know from my emails what I did. I took this manual, Disaster Shock, how to cope with emotional stress of a major disaster, that was developed at the University of San Francisco, and there are 5 authors of that. I was the senior author, and we wrote that after an earthquake disaster in 1989, and then we revised it after the 9/11 attacks, and we sent that to agencies all through the United States. And that particular manual, this is from the table of contents. It's a very practical how-to manual describing mostly CBT, but also some art therapy techniques that you can use. And so it was meant to be very practical, and so this part 1 is targeted for the parent, because if the parent is calm, usually the child will be calmer. But there's a section on how to talk to the child to calm the child. So this has been around for a long time. It's on the University of San Francisco website. So what I did was, I thought, this is great. I talked to Judy, got permission to distribute this, and then I went to our book on school-based family counseling, and I'd selected 6 chapters that had to do with crisis intervention. So there's Teresa and Lauren's chapter on how to do a crisis intervention in the school, because that's a nice way to reach children when a whole city or a whole country is being affected. Then Teresa has a chapter on working with childhood trauma. Maria Marchetti Mercer has a chapter describing some gun violence that occurred in a school in South Africa. Ceci Puede, that's Yes We Can, that's Spanish for Yes We Can, and it describes Nancy Iverson's school-based program where she worked with children for a year and helping them deal with grief and loss in the school. And then Chris Traylor's article described an intervention he made after the 9/11 attacks in the United States. And then finally, Barbara Woods from New Zealand described in her chapter her preventive depression program. So it's about 70 pages. So I put them all into one file, and I sent them off to 20 different agencies and individuals in Paris, in Brussels, in Lahore, in San Bernardino. And so for like an 8-week period, it was very labor intensive to do that. So this is a letter that I wrote to somebody in Brussels, and this is the English translation. And I found that I got a very good response from people. And this is from somebody in Pakistan. Now, the problem with these materials, they're all in English. And I found a family therapist in Paris who's currently translating the disaster shock manual into French. She's about halfway through because it takes a long time to do. And this is from somebody in San Bernardino. So I stopped in April, and as you know, all this stuff is just continuing. Yeah. So I think if this is a project we want to continue, we need to form a team. We need more than one person sort of organizing. All right, the future. So I think in 10-year chunks, and I figure in 2026, if I can find my teeth, I will still be coming here. So our central challenge, as I see it for the future, is dealing with what I call the silo model. The idea that within our mental health guilds, there's only one best way to work with children or schools or families. It's a very pernicious thing in the mental health disciplines. And last year with some colleagues, I gave a presentation on what I call the mental health guilds, because our various professions and disciplines function very much like 16th century guilds that were designed to exclude people from competing with them. And my guild, Counseling Psychology, it's been a very bad offender in this area. So the silo model, this is a picture of a town in Italy. What's the town?
Urbino.
Thank you. Have you been there?
No, but I want to.
It looks very cool. So all of our professions, they function in isolation, and school-based family counseling is meant to cut across all of this. So it's meant to be interdisciplinary. But the problem is we get blocked from doing it because of the silo model that, no, that's not proper. It's not the right way to do this. And Alan Marotti, who has been here many times, and he's the dean of the School of Education at University of Alaska at Fairbanks. The first time he came here, he came up to me after I did a presentation, and he said to me, you know, Brian, what you just described, the American School Counseling Association is totally opposed to that. And I thought, oh gee, I've got somebody here at the symposium who's going to be really difficult, but he was actually very pro. So how do we move forward? What are some strategies? There's 7 I want to share with you. The first is we really need to increase publishing in our journal. We only have about 4 articles that are published each year. We're not publishing enough in the journal, and I know that Hans, he's going to talk about that on Wednesday. And we need to also publish in our own silo journals to help educate people about this model, because where do you go if you want to find articles on school-based family counseling other than the International Journal? Where do you go? It's very hard to find these articles.
There's one more way that you can do this. There's now this ResearchGate and academia.com.edu. Those are important places because people just Google you, and if they get it, so they don't even have to go to those silo journals, but they can get the article because it's on your website for ResearchGate. It's a very, very good. I have increased my reading from 0 5 years ago to thousands.
Okay. Let's hear more about that on Friday, because we can make sure we post up there. The second strategy is we really need to engage in evidence-based research. A lot of the research on school-based family counseling is anecdotal, and we need to think more about traditional ways of researching that. We also need to work more collaboratively with each other. It's not good enough just to come together once a year, because it's expensive to come here. Not everybody can afford to come every year. We need to find some ways to stay connected with each other. And Gertina and Peter and Sheena and Hans and I, we had monthly meetings using GoToMeeting, and I think that worked pretty good. There's a feeling of connection from month to month. And any of us can use the GoToMeeting account. We're making it available for anybody who wants to use that. A fourth strategy is we need to follow through with support for the existing teams. And you know, when we when we initiated the Pine Ridge team, there were 2 newspapers, I think they were local newspapers in North Dakota, that were very excited, and they did a write-up on this and sort of create, as you said, it creates expectations. We really need to come through with this. But I think we need to figure out how do we go and do a consultation team with Native Americans and not be a bunch of white consultants coming in saying this is the best thing. On the disaster relief team, here's some tasks that I think are important. We need to have a team. And we need to revise the disaster shock manual because the original form of that was 1989. We really need a clearinghouse on dealing with disaster shock kinds of things. And we need to develop some partners in affected countries. And I know that Yasmin in Turkey wants to be involved. Strategy 5, Michael and I were talking about this earlier. I added this item this afternoon. Yes, I thought this is great. You're absolutely right. We need a user-friendly internet clearinghouse. And that clearinghouse could be on anybody's website, but we need to link it to ours so that families, so parents, teachers, mental health professionals can easily get information. We need to continue to meet annually to the extent that we are able. There's something about physically coming together that's very powerful and very enabling. Next year, we're going to be meeting in Venice on these dates, and we'll be at Venice International University. This island, San Servamo, is the whole island is Venice International University, which is a consortium of 15 universities around the world. They host about 25 symposia there every year, and they've given us a special time slot. And this actually, I think, is the Lido, where there's a beach there. It's a very nice beach. It's
quite difficult to get there from where you are, though.
Yes, you have to go this way and then go back.
But
it's only 10 minutes by water taxi to St. Mark's Square. So we're thinking it'll give us a bit of independence from all the tourists, and yet we'll be able to engage in that. And then our model is to come back here for 2 years, and then Katrina and I have been talking about possibly going to Singapore in 2 years. And some of you indicated you'd like to go to Vancouver. You know, I used to live in Vancouver. It rains half the year. Are you sure you really want to go to Vancouver? You really want So, strategy number 7, and I think this is the most important one. We need to be visionary leaders in the field. And so the reason you are here is because we regard you as visionary leaders in the field. And I think to inspire others is a very